We're going to dig up a lot of information at Brookgreen Gardens today. Find out what it's all about. Coming up next on All American People. Good morning. Welcome to All American People. This morning we're at the Holiday Cottage at Brookgreen Gardens, one of the South's most amazing destinations. We're focused on the historical initiative, and we're visiting with Charlene Winkler, the Director of Public Operations and Historic Interpretation here at Brookgreen Gardens. Good morning, Charlene.
Good morning and welcome. We're glad to have you.
This is already kicked off yesterday with Dr. Charles Jones Evans, and of course the opportunity to get you in, knowing that you've been here, I think you said 15 years.
15 years, yes.
Couldn't think of anyone better. When we talked to Bob Jewell, y'all's CEO, he said, you got to get Charlene on the show if you're going to be down here. Of course, anyone who's spent any time here in the Holiday Cottage would just feel good about getting up in the morning. This is a beautiful facility.
It is beautiful, and you know, the view from here, just like any view throughout the gardens, is wonderful.
Yes,
Wonderful,
yes,
yeah.
Truly. Folks need to take the time to get down here if
Yes,
they
they
haven't
do.
been recently.
They do.
Real quick about yourself, Charlene. Are you originally from the area?
I was born in Loris.
Oh, great.
Yes,
Good.
I lived there 3 years and then moved to Virginia, but I grew up in Hampton, Virginia.
Okay.
And then lived in Washington, D.C. for a while, lived in New Orleans for over 10 years, and then came back to the beach, right?
That you did.
Yes.
Those early 3 years must have really stuck with you.
They did. You know, you always go back to your roots, and this is where I'm from.
Absolutely. Well, it's an amazing area. And of course, so many folks come back. Horry County is the largest county in the state. Georgetown County, I think, is the fourth largest geographically. So you've had a direct connection to these two very large counties here. And to think about this amazing large, you can't even just call it a gardens.
Well,
There's so much more.
It's over 9,000 acres.
Wow.
And it encompasses the gardens. We have the zoo. We have that magnificent sculpture collection, one of the finest American figurative sculpture collections in the country. And now we're studying more about the history of the land before the Huntingtons, the people that lived here before Brookgreen Gardens existed.
And that goes back how far? I mean, what did y'all have been able to research?
Well, this area started developing in the late 1600s. Around 1700, 1730 are when the 4 plantations that make up Brookgreen Gardens today were acquired by Englishmen who became rice planters, indigo planters and rice planters. So it goes back about almost 300 years at this point.
Golly, so there clearly is an important role of kicking off the historical initiative. Obviously, y'all celebrating 80 years this year, 2011, throughout the year.
Right.
All of the 80-year anniversary celebrations.
Right.
That in and of itself is a big deal.
Oh, it's a tremendously big deal. Anna and Archer Huntington came here and they purchased over 9,000 acres in 1930, and then they established Brookgreen Gardens in 1931, and it's been open to the public since then. And their goal was to preserve the plants, the native animals, and to establish the sculpture gardens. Kind of a joining of art and nature, as Archer Huntington said.
I did not know it had been open to the public since 1931.
Yes.
That's
yes.
probably one of the rare, is there anything like that here in the state or throughout the Southeast that, unlike public state parks and otherwise, I mean, this was something that was taken on as a private thing, but to make it open to the public was a real commitment back in the early 30s.
Yes, it was. I don't know if there's anything else with this time span, but certainly we're unique in many instances.
Yes.
And I always think of Brookgreen with the different aspects of it as being like an onion where there are many, many layers. You can peel back what we have here today, and then you find the layer under that, which is the early history of the Huntingtons. Then you go beyond that, and it's the rice plantations and the owners during that time. And then beyond that, there are even the Native Americans that were in this area. And in this area, it was probably the Waccamaw people who lived along the river here.
What all is that, what different areas has that taken you down, delving into the historical aspects prior to the Huntington's purchase in 1930? You've had to go to lots of different sources.
Well, we go to different resources for research, but the basic research can be done right here on the land.
Really?
Through archaeology. And in the 1980s, we had a very small archaeological survey done, and they were at that point able to determine where some of the buildings had been on the 4 plantations. And then in the early 1990s, the Friends of Brookgreen Gardens, along with Coastal Carolina, did 4 to 5 years of archaeology here, because one of our most famous inhabitants here was governor of South Carolina in 1812, and he married Aaron Burr's only daughter, Theodosia. So, you know, we have a lot of national history here as well.
Yes.
And Theodosia was tragically lost at sea. And so that's a very short romantic story, part of the history of the Oaks Plantation. And the Friends of Brookgreen Gardens were interested in finding the house site where Governor Alston and Theodosia lived. And so for 4 or 5 years, they did archaeology down there. And we found the house site.
Really?
They found all kinds of remains down there. And they also went out in the woods and they found the area where the slave village was. So as part of our historic initiative, so that we could take people out to those areas, we built a trail. And it's the Oaks History and Nature Trail. And it's about 1.5 miles long, and it winds through all of the archaeological areas. And we also included the Alston Cemetery, the family cemetery, as part of that trail. So that's one thing we absolutely are so very proud of, that people can now go out in the woods and walk through these archaeological sites.
And that's open on a daily basis, or?
It's open on a
Right.
daily basis.
Right.
People have to take a Brookgreen vehicle out there because it is out in the woods.
Right, right. Is there a guide that's needed for that? Or?
No, it's a self-guided tour.
Right.
There are interpretive signs all along the 1.5 mile trail,
Wonderful.
explaining where people are and what they're seeing. And then the person who takes them out there can answer questions for them, and we're certainly always willing to provide more information if they want it.
One of the little jewels there. Another jewel, we think of
Yeah.
this as a real jewel of the South,
Right.
or of the country.
Yeah.
And to think about all the different, what are some other things that viewers would need to see on an historical side if they were visiting Brookgreen for the first time or for the 800th time?
Well, another trail that we've built, again following an archaeological dig site, is right in the main part of the gardens. It's just behind the Low Country Center, and that's the Low Country Trail. And that was, the archaeology was done there in the late 1990s.
Oh, boy.
And it was the overseer's complex for Brookgreen Plantation. And we unearthed the kitchen site, we unearthed the smokehouse site. We know where the overseer's cottage was located, and that's a building that still exists, but it's in the gardens now, used for an entirely different purpose. And we added to that trail along the rice field 4 large stainless steel sculptures, one representing a plantation owner, one representing the overseer, and then an enslaved African female, an enslaved African male. And that again is a self-guided tour with interpretive signage that people can walk along there and enjoy and learn on their way to the zoo.
Yes, the
Yeah.
Low Country Trail is, as you're heading to the zoo, you
Right.
virtually would walk along.
You would take the Low Country Trail to get there.
That's
Yeah.
tremendous. And the zoo is probably something that a lot of people don't think about when they hear Brookgreen Gardens, but it does tie into the 80th. I saw the slogan in a
Yeah.
recent
The
publication.
new one.
The new slogan celebrating 80 years
Right.
of excellence in sculpture, plants, animals, and
And
history.
That's
And
right.
so very important, both members and visitors and tourists alike will be hearing that slogan throughout the 80th anniversary and probably beyond
Right.
as they think about the significance of the true excellence in sculpture, plants, animals, and history. The animal aspect there, share about the zoo.
Well, the Huntingtons, their original vision was to create the gardens, display sculpture, and preserve the plants and animals of the southeastern United States. And they had a zoo. They built their own zoo. As you come into Brookgreen Gardens today, there's one large pond where you come in. The original zoo was located there.
Oh, I didn't know
Then in the 1970s, they moved it down to its current site. They built the Cypress Aviary, which, if you've been in there, it's a 70-foot tall mast with, you walk through the aviary. It's a cypress swamp with birds that you would find in the swamp.
Right.
And then we have our otters. We have the underwater exhibit where you actually watch them swimming underwater. And then we have the natural exhibit where they play on top of the water begging for food most of the time. And then of course our 70-year-old alligator, who is huge, is in the next exhibit. He winks an eye occasionally, so you know he's not a piece of sculpture sitting in there. And then the fox, and then the birds of prey. We have 2 bald eagles. All of our raptors, our eagles, our owls, and our hawks are animals that have been injured and they can't survive on their own, so they're not flighted birds. They, we're kind of their old age home or something. You know, take care of them because they can't take care of themselves.
Oh, golly, Charlene.
But we have a wonderful collection of raptors,
Yes.
hawks and owls, and the eagles.
You know, we've got a number of topics to get into, and I sure want to get into a number of those, as well as some of the tremendous awards you've gotten recently. But I was just thinking of something while you're talking. Charlene, if someone was visiting Brookgreen Gardens for the first time, and I almost hate to put you on the spot on this, but if, let's say they live overseas, they can only visit Brookgreen one time, and they're coming here, they've got 3, maybe 4 hours max. So there's something they have to do, something they have to see if they've only have that opportunity to visit once in a lifetime. Is there something that they really need to see? Of course, we're here at the Holiday Cottage, so there's just a great aspect here, as you said, the beautiful view throughout to the cottage, all over the scenery here. But is that too tough a question? Or?
No, it's not a difficult question because it's a question that we have to answer a lot. Many people come in for only 1 or 2 hours, and so when you put some thought into it and think, all of Brookgreen as a whole is unique.
Right, yes.
But what is something that people will carry with them? And that certainly is Oak LA, live Oak LA. Walking down under 250-year-old live oaks with the Spanish moss, looking at Dionysus, our gilded sculpture that is at the end of Oak LA, and then walking to the back of the gardens along what we call the Carolina Terrace and looking out over the rice fields that are left back there. I mean, just taking that walk, you have sculpture, you have the just magnificence of what the low country of South Carolina represents. And if you happen to be here in April and fortunate enough to be here for a sunset, the most beautiful sunset you'll ever see is over the rice fields at the back of the gardens.
Wow, well that is great. Thank you for sharing that for our viewers who may have never visited Brookgreen but have a real desire to get down here, may not be able to commit a full day or even more than a day to come visit. Surely walking through there, and they have to see quite a bit getting over to Oak.
Well, they
LA.
do. They do.
Right, so there are surely some things they have to walk through to get there.
Right.